say they were an expert. Oh, thanks, Nachama. So I put the expert, the one in there early, but I like that so many people feel they're proficient and competent. So we're going to take that with you, and hopefully by the end of the session, you're going to move up one more level. And I also want you to, the second question, see if I can get it to go. Why do you do HTM? So think about, in just like a word or a phrase, why you do it. I'll stop the share so we can be like a little more dramatic when I show it to you. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look. Why do you do HTM? I love that what's standing out the most is fun. There's a lot of different motivators and reasons that people are doing it. Building the foundation in Hebrew, it's kinesthetic, emotional connection, creating a Hebrew-rich environment, fostering more connections to Hebrew, immersing, engaging, building vocabulary, joy. It works. I love that, right? It works. So wonderful. And a big piece as we're thinking about this, keeping in mind why it is that you do HTM, and always keeping that in the back of your mind as well. So we want to welcome everyone again. I know some people came in a little bit later. We're thrilled to have you here with us. For what we'd like to do to start things off, we are going to do a quick breakout rooms, and we'd like to give you an opportunity to get to know some of your colleagues who are here joining us today. We'd like you to introduce yourself, describe your HTM experience, and what you hope to gain from the session. This is like super quick. So the first two questions, keep really brief and focus on the third one. You'll have like a minute and a half each. All right, Nachama, are we good to do the breakouts? Wonderful. Nachama, you may want to pause the recording. Okay, so we'll have an opportunity, hopefully, to be able to see what everyone else is doing and how to better support the HTM teachers, brush up on HTM learning from the field. There's a lot of just really to be able to be here and share different ideas, which hopefully that will be really helpful. Alicia, yeah, I love hearing from our colleagues too, and the different ways that they adjust and adapt things, how HTM itself is evolving, and how to really support the teachers. If anyone else has pushback on this, ooh, Gloria, we can add that to our list. How to re-engage in some next steps. Okay, great, wonderful. So, oh, we have more too. Okay, good. How to implement HTM in the setting for the first time. Wonderful. So hopefully we'll be able to touch on a number of these different things and come back to the questions later. We thought it would be really interesting just to give you an opportunity to meet Gloria and hear a little bit about her experience working with HTM. For those of you who came on later, I had mentioned Gloria and I worked together for many years at the Temple-Tifereth Israel, and she really has been instrumental and really a role model for me too in this work with Hebrew Through Movement. So we're really thrilled to have her here today. So Gloria, can you just share a little bit about how you were first introduced to HTM?
Well, I went to Seattle College of Jewish Studies quite a few years ago and went for my master's in Jewish education. And my professor and mentor was Dr. Lifsa Schachter. who taught us about James Asher's total physical response. And that was really the precursor to Hebrew through movement. And we learned about it, and it was fascinating. I ended up writing my master's paper on it. And then when I was the executive educator at the Temple-Tifereth Israel, after 2 years there, I was able to convince the director to try and do Hebrew through movement. And we started it slowly. Dr. Schachter was our, taught us continuing education. All our staff went through a year's worth of training. And at the same time, we were really developing it. We were thinking of vocabulary. There was no curriculum. We were all the guinea pigs in a sense. And the teachers, like everywhere else, some teachers were more receptive than others, or were more comfortable. And over a number of years, we realized that there wasn't quite the consistency we wanted. And some classes were having phenomenal experiences. Others were getting it in between the other curriculum that the teacher thought was more important. And we ended up switching to a Hebrew through movement specialist, which was wonderful. It was wonderful for the teachers who were not so comfortable teaching Hebrew through movement, and also gave us consistency and a foundation that the teacher could continue to build on. And we've been doing it for quite a while.
Oh, wait, wasn't there, Nachama, didn't you post a question on Facebook about how long Hebrew through movement's been going on?
I almost spilled the beans just before in our mini session.
You didn't though, right? Is this like, can we do the big reveal now?
Sure.
Okay. How long has it been?
Lifsa Schachter worked this out in 2002.
Wow.
Which means that this is the 20th anniversary of the start of Hebrew through movement.
Very cool. Happy anniversary.
Indeed. That's a long time. Like most educational changes take hold for 5 years. As Lifsa said, it's amazing that this has really grown and developed for 20.
It took a long time at the temple for it to grow to what it has become.
Right. So, and Leah had that question if there was pushback, and I just wanted to highlight in what you were saying. You were talking about, you spoke with the education director, getting their buy-in, who then had to get the buy-in from the clergy. Then you had the buy-in from the teachers. So like in each of those things, Gloria's behind the scenes, you were getting some pushback from people.
Absolutely.
Getting that full buy-in, right? But that's one of the things that you just kind of stayed the course and kept on it along the way.
The difference is now there's some data and more experience. We were the guinea pigs.
Right. Okay. So I'm curious, you talked a little bit and said how working with the specialists really made a huge difference. And I'm curious, I'm also curious, sometimes I know some of the specialists have their own rooms, some of them don't. Some years we've had people in preschool, sometimes older. So of those different, with the rooms and things, what have you found to be most successful?
The most successful is having the specialists have their own rooms. It removes tremendous amount of stress on the Hebrew through movement teacher. It also saves time, because by the time they wheel their cart or bring their materials set up, and half the lesson is over. I mean, I don't know how much time you devote, but we have depending on the grade, between 10 and 20 minutes per session. So a lot is lost if you're busy with all your manipulatives. The teachers love having their own room. We have to make adaptations because we don't have that many classrooms always. So sometimes we have to use different spaces, but we've tried to accommodate that so that at least
I'm listening about Hebrew through movement. I'm listening about Hebrew.
Okay,
so that we have everything set up and they're ready to go.
Nice. And what about, okay, so then, and then there's also one of the questions where sometimes there are questions around it is if, since it's done throughout all these ages in the synagogue, if somebody comes in later, how is it that kids can kind of pick it up, or how is it made more comfortable for them?
Well, the one thing about Hebrew through movement is no one's supposed to be put on the spot. Like nobody has to answer individually. So basically, they look at their peers and they get answers, and they don't always know the answers, and they're not judged by it. You know, if you're not sure, you look at your friend and you look at someone else who seems to know the answer and put it together, and you're never put on the spot so that you're feeling like you don't know something.
Nice. And Nachama, did you want to launch that video so we could see that example?
I do. So this video, we're gonna do it twice. This is a first grade class from many years ago. It was recorded in November, and I want you to pay attention to the amount of time it takes between the teacher giving the command and what the various kids are doing. We're only going to watch about 10 seconds, and the sound can be soft. If need be, I'll tell you what they're saying. Lalechet la'at. La roots. That was the watch. So Gloria, you want to talk about this? I'll do it one more time though. You talk about it and then I'll play it again.
Well, there are some children who aren't quite sure, but there's one little girl who, before the full word is out of the teacher's mouth, she catches it, she knows what to do, and she's off. But the video isn't showing as well as it could, so it's sort of hard to tell.
Yeah, let me just do it one more time. And you have kids that are learning in the early childhood program. Some began in kindergarten and some in first grade.
So you can see the little girl in the blue dress knew as soon as the word was coming out of the teacher's mouth what to do. But she had had some of the Hebrew through movement in the preschool that we have here.
Great, thank you. That's an excellent illustration of it. I'm also, one of the things that I think is your superhero power is just your ability to compile and really, I would say, amass materials. And you spend a lot of time over the years. So I'm curious, like, what your strategy has been around that.
Basically, anywhere I can find materials. When we first started, Amazon was not quite as popular with some of these things. I was purchasing from Judaica stores, from discount stores. Now there's a lot. I mean, you can always find on Amazon, toy companies, and I also use my own materials. Teachers brought in some of their own materials if you're talking about holidays and things. But even places like Bed Bath & Beyond, after Passover, I bought, I think it was a dozen Passover plates for really inexpensive so that the students could have their own manipulatives. And again, you want different types. So any different one. I don't want them all to think that one Haggadah or one Keara is what the Passover plate is.
Nice. Okay, that's great. And you also, like, some other things you've done, and it really helps the teachers have less stress because you have, like, when you have these materials together, you also do a beautiful job in meeting with the staff. So can you talk a little bit about when and how you meet with them?
Well, we meet during the summer, the Hebrew through movement teachers, we meet together, plan things out on a rough scale. During the year, the teachers get to meet during our Sunday morning staff meetings. They also have a few scheduled during the year, but a lot of it is informal. And they also, anytime they don't have a class, if their students are on a retreat or have some special program for that grade level, they get to go into the other teacher's classroom to observe, to get some ideas, or just to share.
Awesome. And I think that sort of, like, that connects a lot with how you supervise HTM teachers and how you share feedback with them because you are so collaborative. So can you talk about that a little bit?
We don't do formal assessment. We're much more informal. I don't like top down. So basically we talk, we question, and people give suggestions. We're very collaborative and nobody is sort of put on the spot.
Right. So it's actually, in a lot of ways, it's modeling the same thing that happens
Correct.
with Hebrew Through Movement, right? And you set up that team with your teachers in the same way. I'm also curious, you told me that there was really a big difference for these past 2 years of COVID. I was with you in one of them, but seeing this past year too, you've noticed some differences. So I'm curious if you would share that with all of us too.
Well, I found that this year, although we were in person most of the year, I almost feel like the students were still in the regular COVID mode. Pre-COVID, their experiences were amazing. When we were on Zoom, the Hebrew Through Movement teachers did a wonderful job of providing. We had manipulatives and cards and pictures, thanks to the Jewish Education Center helping us. We sent packets to each student and they could use them during the sessions, but the sessions were short. We had 5-minute Hebrew Through Movement sessions. And again, when you're not in person, there's not that same communal learning. When you're on the screen, it's almost like you're put on the spot. Like people can see if you're making a mistake. So I think that
made it harder.
Made it harder as well.
Okay. So, and I know I had some more questions for you, but I want to be careful with our time as well, and wanted to open this up and give an opportunity if people had questions that they wanted to ask you.
I saw one that went in the chat while I was speaking.
Yes.
Asked about a rolling cart because they don't have a classroom. We have done that. It's doable. It's just a little more stress for the teacher. There's no question, but we did that for a number of years.
And you would just have to leave a little extra time
Right.
for movement. Okay, good. And do other people have questions for Gloria? Beth?
So we have a smallish school. Classrooms are close together, one hallway, and I have one Hebrew Through Movement teacher. Is it asking too much? I shouldn't be asking this because this is what I've got, but am I really being unrealistic and expecting her to teach every grade level? Because we have combo classes, but it's a gone through 6th grade program.
Okay. Is it existing now or you're starting it?
No, we've been doing it. She came on March of this past year in person, first time. I was doing it before, half-heartedly. And then we had someone who was doing it Zoom during COVID. We started just before we went through the pandemic. So she's been through the entire program. She seems solid, but this is her first full year going into it in person. She started in March.
I think it's a lot. It's probably a lot of prep, but if she's prepared for it, or I don't know how far in your 6th grade, do you want her to be doing prayer and tefillah words, or do you want her to do the holiday word? It depends on what you want to focus on. You might be better off at the beginning, at least letting her perhaps do 4th through 6th grade, doing the same holiday vocabulary. And maybe next year, once she's more comfortable, growing it for the older grades.
That's helpful. Thank you.
And if other people have ideas for Beth, please, feel free to put that in the chat too. I see Josh had a question. If anyone had a HTM specialist job description, you want to just send and put it in the chat, that would be awesome. Very helpful. Does anyone else have questions? Rochelle and then Leah. Rochelle, you're muted.
Thank you. I'm not fast with the technology. I haven't Zoomed for a while. Yeah, I just wanted to say I'm hardly a new teacher, but I've been newly hired at the school to be the HTM specialist, and I'm responding to the last question to do K through 4. It sounds to me they don't do it anymore in 5 and 6. And a schedule was set up for me, with half-hour chunks saying, it's really around 20 minutes, sometimes a little less, a little more. So if you have extra time, I said, that's for me to breathe in between groups, right? So I expect it to be doable. I expect to be tired. But I say that for real and tongue in cheek.
Of course.
But there's repetition in what you're doing. And the older classes hopefully will keep moving on. But I think it's doable. I'll let you know in 3 months
Good luck.
how it went.
Thank you. Leah?
So I have just started in this position, and the foundation is there and the program exists, and enough buy-in was certainly established at some point because it has been implemented, but there is a small but vocal group who don't seem to understand, and I have not myself tried to explain. My predecessor spent a lot of effort trying to explain the pedagogy and trying to explain the reasoning and explaining the sound to print, and there are people who still reject all of that. And I don't know, I'm not going to approach it the same way as my predecessor because it clearly didn't work, but I didn't know if the group had any other insights as to how to convince or show or what it might be, a small but vocal group who insists that this can't possibly be working.
Nachama, do you want to respond to that one?
Yeah, I was waiting to see if someone else is going to jump in. I'll do it via a story that may or may not help. When Hebrew Through Movement first went national out of Cleveland, I expected people to respond to me and say, oh, it's so wonderful. These kids are learning all these words. That's me with my way of thinking. And instead, I kept hearing, oh my gosh, this is so much fun. Like that big word that came out in that early Wordle thing. It's so much fun. The kids are enjoying this. It has brought excitement and energy to our Hebrew program that just wasn't there before. So in most cases, if I put this into the Onward Hebrew bigger bucket, people often start with Hebrew Through Movement because that creates the energy that impacts all these other things that are going on. And in some ways, it's a matter of, you can, I don't know, you said that people are doing it now generally, but like if there's a group to start with and to help that group, like if you were just starting, I would say start with a group that you think it's going to work real well with. And then you just got to keep telling the stories and showing the pictures and doing all those things that we do so that parents hear and they also get a sense of their kids. It was interesting too that when we were on Zoom, people were saying parents are overhearing this and they're understanding there's a lot of Hebrew going on and their kids are enjoying it. So that might also be a clue as to, you don't want to necessarily go on Zoom unless you have to, but that there are ways to help parents into this so they can see what's happening.
Right. And I also think like over the years, it's been interesting hearing different scripts or examples that other educators have used and the ones who talk about it in a very positive. Sometimes people will say, well, we're doing this, but we're not doing that. The ones who emphasize what you are doing and what is happening and the benefit that you're seeing. I know Gloria certainly points to, you talked a little bit how, like, in some ways this past year, you were saying the students really, after COVID, they didn't have the same HTM experience. And anecdotally, you were seeing that the students who are strong students weren't as confident as before. So sometimes it's just and really the storytelling and the anecdotal things. And I'm building a little drama towards what Nachama is going to be talking about with her action research. So you'll have some data you can share too. Were there any other questions that people wanted to add? Denise?
We're going to be using it in our preschool program, and we sort of had thought to start with like our almost 3-year-old class, but like I read all the information, like are the 2-year-olds too little? Like, it seems like it would be a shorter amount of time, but like, is there a sweet spot? Should we wait to roll it out to these almost 3-year-olds first before we, our 2-year-olds are like newly 2 in those classes? Just sort of thoughts on how young is too young.
So I certainly, like, I've seen it, usually it's done around that 8, like with the 3s and up. I don't know, Nachama, maybe you have a better sense of that, if there are places across the country that are doing it younger.
Well, I would have said the Temple-Tifereth Israel in Cleveland, I understood, which is your old place, was doing it at 18 months. So people have started earlier. And I was like, wait, they're still figuring out their English, but it's worked well, I understand, from that teacher. I'm going to share with you in the chat a video, which some of you may have seen. This is one of, we taped this in the summertime with a teacher who the kids had, it was not their normal teacher. We were doing this master teacher seminar, someone went in to teach. And these kids had most of them, I think, had been in the program since 3. So they were either 3 or 4 or heading into 5. So probably 2 years of Hebrew through movement-ish. And it was amazing with this new teacher who they'd never seen and so on. They did very well. So they get it well at this young age. And this is once a week. There's a program at Temple Israel in Memphis that I think it's either 3s or 4s. She teaches 4 days a week, 45 minutes Hebrew. A big segment of that is Hebrew through movement, and it's amazing. She does songs, she does all kinds of things. So definitely go for it with your early childhood and experiment and see what works for you.
Yeah, then we want to hear about it too. Good. Okay, excellent. Thank you. So I think people are really, I want to build off that question that Leah had asked about sharing some different ways to present. And Nachama, you did a really interesting action research project. So we're hoping you can share a little bit about your findings and what the research indicated.
I'd be happy to. So let me share. So for many years now, I have been suggesting to people that within a part-time synagogue setting, it makes sense not just to do Hebrew through movement for running, jumping, spinning, all that stuff that we do, but that it makes sense to move beyond into holidays, which I think most people do. And more so, I feel its superpower is with teaching prayers and blessings. But that came from bits and pieces here and there. And what I decided to do, we had an Onward Hebrew community of practice that worked on action research. You could choose whatever you want. And I decided to choose the 4 questions. Some of you may have seen me post about this in various places. Marcia Anucci, one of our master teachers years ago, had done a demo lesson on teaching. She taught chametz, matzah, yoshvin, and misubin. And what was amazing is that when the lesson was done, we turned off the cameras and the kids had this strange look on their face. Lipsa was sitting in the room and she said, well, what are you thinking? And the kids said, we had no idea what these words meant. And what made even more impact was that a year later, one of the local Cleveland teachers said, I taught 3 weeks doing 4 questions the way I normally do. But then I did this Hebrew through movement lesson. And also at the end, they had these strange looks on their faces. And they said, again, we had no idea what these words meant. And she thought I just taught them. So for me, there's power in doing this, but I didn't have anything to hold it on other than these anecdotal stories. So my research question had to do with introducing key words of the 4 questions and to see how it would impact kids' comprehension and whether it would create positive feelings. I created, with the help of our master teachers, 4 lessons on the 4 questions so that you could get through 13 words, which, believe it or not, if you've got 13 words, that's almost all the words you need in the 4 questions to understand everything because there's so much repetition. 3 of our master teachers agreed to do this. And you can see the different grade levels. Oh, sorry, I'm moving the wrong screen. Sorry. That's where I want to be. you can see the grade levels that they did. 2 of the classes did 2 lessons and 1 of the classes did 3 lessons. They could do whichever they wanted. And I asked them at the end of the first session and whatever their last session was to do an interview with kids. I gave them questions. The kids filled out a survey. The teachers filled out a questionnaire, and the parents were asked afterwards if they would send an email if anything happened at the Seder around the 4 questions. So in the kids survey, and by the way, this is going to be a little disjointed because it would take me normally a bunch of time to spin this out, but I have about 10 minutes. So before this year, the kids gave these responses, none, a word or 2, some or most. And a couple questions later, we asked, so this year, what do you know? And you can see better if I take the words away, the weighting from none to 1 or 2 to some or most, which was, I thought, pretty impressive. We asked the kids in the beginning in each of these 3 classes, so what words do you now know? And one of the girls, this is not her picture, talked about Ben Yoshvin, and she talked about Misubin. I've highlighted in these in yellow the key things that I want to focus on. So she talked about Misubin. She defines it, slumping in your chair or leaning to show how hard the work was. We can now relax. Now, what's interesting is the Hebrew through movement teacher never taught that in that specific way. It's about teaching the words and they're learning to recline and sit up straight and so on. Something for this child created another connection. And she also, at another point, identified charoset. And from a memory that she had, she says, I like to eat it on my matzah because this happened prior to the current Pesach. We asked the kids, how will knowing the words make you feel at a Seder, which is them projecting. And again, you can see, and these are not all the positive responses, but a selection, feel good, feel better, confident, happy, which that was good for me to see. And this girl who had given that response earlier, I call her that kid because she kept speaking up and she kept saying, it's like when you're doing things, you go, oh, I want them to say this. She kept saying the things that I wanted her to say. So she was that kid. But she talked about not only herself, but her family feeling proud and happy because she now knows what the words mean. And she had talked in a later point about, I think she was the youngest child in her family, one of the youngest ones at the Seder. So she was doing the 4 questions and there were people older and she was worrying about being embarrassed about all kinds of things, including if someone asked her what the words meant, she previously would not know what, and she would feel embarrassed, but she said, I feel ready, I know what they mean. That kid's mom wrote in afterwards about her being very excited to showcase her skills. But as you can see from this email, she didn't mention the meanings, but there was another piece to this, which again, she learned in other places. And she herself talked about doing the 4 questions when she was interviewed afterwards. And again, she's focusing not on the meaning, but she's focusing on other things, which meant that more was going on. I have been saying with Onward Hebrew, we can't post-hole the Hebrew learning. We can't say Hebrew is 9:15 to 10:15, but we have to think about it as all, in all kinds of places in our educational program. But I didn't do that myself with Hebrew through movement. I had it 15 minutes. That's kind of it. So I was learning something different in this particular study. I'm going to show you 2 comments from 6th graders. One talked about how the 4 questions compares this night to all of the other nights, and that we have restrictions to things that we would normally do on other nights. I can guarantee you that the Hebrew through movement teacher did not use the word restrictions in any way or form. And this one, which talks about differentiating what we do on Passover and other nights, the 6th grade classes did have a lesson where they learned Lila, night, Lila Hazeh, this night, which meant either the night of the Seder, particularly or generally Pesach, and Mikol Halilot, that they're things that we do on other nights. This child either made the connections, which is possible, or something else was going on in other classes that he brought into what he was learning with Hebrew through movement and could make that connection across. So my research question is, these are the things that I wanted to know. But when I shared this back And what I had learned with Dr. Netta Avineri, the person who had put together this community of practice on action research, she said, you know, you can't always listen for, well, you can't always, you shouldn't be listening for the things that you want to hear. For me, it was that if you know the words, you get an understanding of the meaning of it, comprehension, and you get positive feelings, but you have to let the data speak to you. So with things that I've told you, I would say that in the end, I ended up with a bigger surprise of what I learned from doing this action research that has huge implications for us with Hebrew through movement. One is there's a bigger context with what's going on. Kids are learning to chant in another place, and that is where the performance is at the Seder. They have other Pesach memories that are coming in. They have their own sense of self and what's important to them, this child and being embarrassed, family culture, family values, that when we think about Hebrew through movement, like for me, it's been, oh, here are my words, here's the lesson I'm doing, but I'm thinking we need to expand this out even farther. And so we need to use Hebrew through movement. I've said this in the past to complement the teaching of prayers, blessings in Hebrew, but now I'm really saying it needs to complement this, which for me means that we have to figure out, especially either those of us as directors or those of us as teachers, what happens when we talk to other people about what particularly is going on in our class and how we plan. I will end by saying that in many Hebrew through movement classes, we have teachers who come with their class, especially if it's a specialist, that the teacher sits in on the class. And when people say, well, what should the teacher be doing? My previous answer has been, well, they could help with crowd control. If the child needs a little extra help with focus, that's what they could help do. Or it would be lovely if they would be paying attention so that they could take the Hebrew back to their own classes and line up kids and do other things using some of the Hebrew words they know. But from my action research, what I learned was when a teacher is sitting in
if you're
room,
thinking about buying,
and this for sure happened with the sixth graders, that teacher who was sitting in the room was having all kinds of conversations with the kids for other pieces of Hebrew teaching. And she was able to build on Halayla Hazeh Mikol Haleilot and talk about differentiation and other things. So I think that we need to just keep widening how we think about Hebrew through movement.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. So we've had an opportunity to go through so much information, a lot of the practical, tactical skills, suggestions, and ideas from Gloria, Nachama sharing her action research. And we want to give you an opportunity to think through and process with some colleagues. So we are going to break up. We're going to go back into the rooms we started with. Mostly, some people came in later. So
I actually messed it up. So sorry, we may end up with new rooms.
we might have new rooms. Well, we'll just find out. It'll be great. And what we want you to do is to think about it. All these different things that you've been hearing today, what you're now going to stop doing, what you're going to start doing, and something that you want to continue to think about. So we ask each of you to share that individually in your discussion. And then we also hope that you will post this on a Padlet, which I'm going to give you the link here, so that later we can all kind of go back, even though we're not all going to have conversations with each other, we can go back in and see how each other are thinking. So we're going to break up. You're going to have about 7 minutes for this. So enjoy. Do you
So
want
if
to
you
pause?
left-
Do you want to pause the
Yes.
recording? Welcome back. Great to see everybody. Oh, I missed it. Okay. We want to give you the link. So if you can put any notes that you had about what you're going to start, stop, and continue to think about, that would be wonderful. We want to thank all of you for taking time in your busy summer schedules and pulling things together to be part of this really incredible conversation. There are a number of resources which really makes things so much easier. So Nachama, if you can share the link for the Hebrew Through Movement website, as well as we're highlighting one piece in particular, the Hebrew Through Movement Shalom Ivrit, which is really helpful for people who are just getting into it to try and boost their skills and abilities. So we hope that those resources will be helpful for you. And this is only one of the amazing Onward Hebrew summer series. Next week, the focus is going to be on tefillah and prayer goals, and we're thrilled to have Rachel Mirsky-Woda, joined by Rabbi Kevin Kleinman and Cantor Farron Rudnick, along with Jay Rappaport, to talk about tefillah and prayer goals. So we hope that you'll be able to join us. And if you have any other questions, of course, you can always put them in the Facebook group, and we hope that everyone has a great rest of the day. Nachama, any parting words?
No, other than we have like 2 minutes, 3 minutes, we could open some conversation if you wanted to. And I'm happy to stay afterwards. I don't know if you can stay, but I'm happy to stay.
Great.
Sorry,
Yeah.
I have a quick question. Was that linked to the Survey Monkey registration for next week's tefillah? I must have missed that, but I want to be in on that one.
You can, it's the same link for everything. So,
Okay.
but you registered before. Why don't I just go in? Who's speaking to me right now?
It's Beth from Boise.
Okay, Beth, I will make sure you're in the tefillah one. You don't have
Thank
to
you.
register.
Maybe I registered. I don't know that I did, but.
Okay, I'll take care of it.
Thank you.
Oh, I did. I did, Nachama.
You did? Okay.
Yeah, well, it's on my calendar. If it's the same link, I'm assuming you'll send it to me. So that's okay.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you
you.
to Stacy and Gloria.
And Nachama.
I just handled this.
And
one.
Rochelle, B'atzlacha. I'm really impressed.
Liz, it's good to see you.
Good to see you, Nachama.
Liz, nice to see you after a long, long time.
A long time.
Nachama, I'll see you soon. And Stacy, you did a spectacularly good job today.
Oh, thank
All
you.
right.
Thank you. It
Rabbi
was
to
great.
rabbi.
Yes.
Nice.
And,
It was terrific.
Nachama wasn't bad either. So thank you all. Bye.
Thank you all. Have a
Thank
good
you.
day. Rest of the day.